Dan asked me to speak again, so you get me instead of, a real pastor, but I can look at the lectionaries and I can find, the church gives you 4, and they, depending on what, denomination or whatever you're in, there are 4. And there's an Old Testament and a New Testament and a Psalms, and then I think there's a gospel lesson. So anyway, I read them and went, whoa, this is heavy. But I thought, I'll just do it on something else. I'll pick my own because it'll be easier, because this one speaks to my soul. And I think that the good Lord uses these kind of opportunities to speak to the person that's speaking as well as the person in the congregation. So here's my stab at this week's lectionaries. So you're probably curious about the dishes. I love dishes. I like old dishes mostly. I like linens. I have no desire to sell them. It's not the value. I don't do it so that I can say someday I'll sell these and I can, make a lot of money. That's not. I like using them. I like setting tables. I love the creativity of finding the right tablecloth or sewing it so that it matches those dishes, and I find them and I say, oh, it's just perfect, and I love them. I love table decorations. I like having the pieces that I need to serve the foods that I want. And I used to entertain when Denny was alive, and then when he died, that was not something that I did much, because it was hard, and getting my house clean and getting the dishes and tables set is just almost more than I can handle. So I have not for a lot of years, except very small, but I love it. I like creating a meal that makes people feel special. I love to cook, and I like the fact that I can make people feel special by having a beautiful table setting. And I love the stories behind the dishes. So when I look at this set, this one, my mom actually bought for me when I got married, and I bought them at June's Antiques. And the woman that sold them, her mother had died, and she was selling her silver and her china to pay for her mother's funeral expenses. I like the connections with the past. When Michelle and I just went home to Minnesota, I brought back my grandmother's dishes, and they had been, I wanted these, I really wanted them, and I didn't get them when my grandmother passed away, and I was here. It was right after 2011, and I couldn't travel, and anyway, I didn't get them. And God is wonderful in many ways, in that after my aunt died, here they were, and nobody wanted them. So I got them for Fiona. So, and they're not valuable, but so Fiona has her first set of china, but in the meantime, they're mine. I like the connections with the past. My mom collects the blue cobalt depression wear. And again, when Michelle and I went home, my mom is 80 and purging, and she said, take whatever you want. I said, I want the blue dishes. So then when she and I were on the road, of course, we didn't have enough in our U-Haul in the minivan. We stopped at an antique place in St. Regis, Montana, and I found more blue dishes. Okay, so we still had room in the trailer for more stuff. Anyway, and of course I needed more dishes. I still have them on my dining room table. But I love it. They make me happy. And I laugh about my vice, right? Because some people smoke and drink and drive race cars or whatever. Yeah. This is mine. And this is probably hoarding, because it is certainly more than I need. It's an abundance. And so when I read, I'm good with it, but when I read the lectionary for this week, I start to feel uncomfortable. Because the parable is about the rich fool. So this is the gospel lesson for this week. Someone in the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me. But he said to them, Friend, who set me to be the judge and arbitrator over you? And he said to them, Take care. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. And then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly. And he thought to himself, what should I do, for I have no place to store my crops? And then he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and all of my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. So relax, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool. This very night your life is being demanded of you, and the things that you have prepared, whose will they be? And so it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich towards God. So now you see about my discomfort when I look at my china cabinet. And it makes me feel guilty about my dishes, or my gardens, or the swimming pool that I have, or my abundance. I have so much. And as they say, if you're born in the United States, you've already won the lottery. I know that based on the world standards, where 50% of the world population, 3 billion people, live on less than $2.50 a day. I'm a rich woman. I, of course, don't see myself as rich because I think I know what rich is. Somebody that drives fancy cars, has nice clothes, has a fancy house. But if I use Webster's definition, wealth is an abundance of valuable material possessions. I fit the description. So, I guess this is God speaking to me. I think it's his way of helping me deal with my guilt about my abundance. So I've really spent the last 3 weeks grappling on this whole concept of wealth and possessions. And Michelle and I, again, when we walk, we process. And fortunately, I don't understand, but there are websites like Text Week where there's a lot of commentaries and sermons on the subject. And so what I'm sharing with you, know that that comes from the wisdom of a lot of people, and it's not necessarily my thoughts specifically. They're smarter than I am. So in interpreting this rich fool parable, Jesus is in the middle of talking to his disciples when he's interrupted by one in the crowd who wants Jesus to settle a financial dispute between siblings. And Jesus, however, says, I'm not going to enter into this family squabble. And instead, he uses it as an opportunity to teach about the seduction of wealth. He's talking about a farmer in this parable. It's a scenario that I can relate to and a person that I can relate to. My parents my dad was, and my mom, they're still basically farmers, just like their families were before them. My husband's family came from a long line of ranchers. And until he passed, it was a vocation that Denny and I, was an avocation and a vocation that he and I shared. And I'm still involved with the industry through the Steers and the 4-H program. But agriculture is a big important. So my biggest challenge when I read that parable is going, well, what was the farmer's problem? Why was he a fool? Because, he is not portrayed as wicked. He's just a farmer whose land has produced abundantly. He's not gained his wealth illegally or by taking advantage of others. Further, he's not portrayed as particularly greedy. Indeed, he has a thriving farm business, and he makes what appears to be reasonable plans to reap the abundance of the harvest. So what's wrong with building larger barns to store away some of today's bounty? I think about John Cox. John had to build a bigger barn to house the hay that he harvests. And what's wrong with storing that up to take care of tomorrow? And if you raise cattle, which Cherie does, you know that there are a lot of lean years, and then maybe you hit one of those occasional years when you're in the black and you say, whoa, I better put this money in savings because next year the cattle prices are probably going to drop.
Which they have.
Which they have, yes. So one could easily argue that this rich man is wise, and he's a responsible person. And having bigger barns mean that he will have ample savings set aside so that he can enjoy his golden years, right? Eat, drink, and be merry. The equivalent of a healthy 401k retirement plan. And isn't that what we're encouraged to do in this world? Isn't it wise and responsible to save for the future? I put money in a thrift savings plan. I saved for my college education. I invested so that I could retire. And this guy has worked hard and saved wisely, and now he can sit back and enjoy the fruits of his labor, right? Well, here's what the scholars say. The farmer's problem isn't that he had a great harvest, or that he's rich, or that he wants to plan for the future. The farmer's problem is that his good fortune has curved his vision so that everything he sees starts and ends with himself. I went, oh, now that you say that, notice the consistent focus throughout the conversation that he has with himself. What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops. And then he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul. So it's the repeated use of the first person and the pronouns, I and my, that betray a preoccupation with self. This guy is going to take care of himself. Another thing is that it seems he has no thought about using his abundance to help others. It isn't about, I can use this to take care of my family, or I can share my wealth, I can increase my tithing to the church. It's that so he can eat, drink, and be merry. He's also full because he gives no expression of gratitude for his good fortune or no recognition to God at all. The rich man's land has produced abundantly, and yet he expresses no gratitude to God for the rain, the seasonable weather which increased his yield, or to the workers who might have helped him gather his abundance. He could have just as easily had drought, or a plague of insects, or the law of supply and demand drop the value of his crops. He didn't say anything about that. And lastly, he's a fool because he has fallen prey to the notion that life, and particularly the good life, consists of his possessions. Soul, you have ample goods. So Jesus isn't warning against money or wealth or material abundance. He's warning against greed. I'm going to build bigger barns and I'm going to take care of myself. So now that I understand more about that interpretation that scholars help me to understand about the parable, how does that story of the rich farmer relate to us? Well, so one, I think, is the whole message about money and possessions. And I believe that we know that having a lot of possessions and money doesn't make us secure or happy. And I found some stories about lottery winners, and they can attest to the fact. And sometimes when I'm going down the road, if I won the lottery, I would spend my money on these things. And then sometimes I think, ooh, but I don't want the pitfalls that come with a lot of money. So here's an example. William Post III won a $16.2 million lottery in the Pennsylvania in 1988. And he fell victim to crime, bankruptcy, tragedy, and simply poor spending habits. So in the 2 weeks after he received his first annual payment of nearly $500,000, he'd already blown 2/3 of it, purchasing a restaurant, a used car lot, and an airplane. And his reckless spending continued. Within 3 months, he was $500,000 in debt. But the numbers were the least of his problems. According to Yahoo News, Post's brother was arrested for hiring a hitman to kill him and his sixth wife, and his relatives convinced him to invest in worthless business ventures, and his landlady duped him into handing over 1/3 of his cash. He ultimately filed for bankruptcy and faced a stint in jail for firing a gun at a bill collector. And he said, I was much happier when I was broke. And he died of respiratory failure in 2006 at age 66, leaving behind his 7th wife and 9 children from his second marriage. Another one, Keith Go didn't squander the majority of his windfall. A group of con men did. So after Go's wife Louise hit the jackpot, the family spent their wealth normally. They bought a luxurious home and he rented a $560,000 luxury box to watch his favorite soccer team. But he began drinking out of boredom after quitting his job at a bakery. He told newspapers that his wife left him, and while being treated in rehab, he met a dastardly named con man who convinced him to the tune of $1.5 million to invest in shady business dealings. He was also renting a $1.6 million house and paying annual salaries to a garden and a chauffeur. But his riches wouldn't be enjoyed for long because he died of a heart attack believed to have been brought on by drinking and stress. And at the time of his death, he still had $1.3 million in the bank. Okay, we think that if we won the lottery, we would be much smarter, right? But we have money. And most of us have worked really hard all of our lives to put aside some money. And my comfort, my definition of comfort, certainly is dictated by the world in which I live. So I think a third person in a third world country would say, geez, I'd just be comfortable if I have enough food to eat today to feel full. And I think I need a new cell phone, I want air conditioning, I need a new kayak to take to the lake. So those things I think I need. And while I don't have a million lottery winnings, I have enough money to meet my needs. And it's little wonder that my needs, or my perceptions of my needs, I've fallen prey to that because it's the world that I live in. You watch television ads, bigger and better. It's important. Fancier cell phones, bigger television with better definition, nicer homes with new appliances. It should make me happy. It should make me secure. And if I invest in a diverse portfolio and have enough in savings to pay for my kids' college and to pay for my property taxes for the next 30 years, or however long I should live, I should be secure, right? It isn't that God doesn't want us to save for retirement or for our future needs. Wealth isn't bad. And there are a number of people in the Bible that were wealthy. Solomon, according to Chronicles, surpassed all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom. He had so much gold and was so wealthy that during his time, silver actually became worthless. In Genesis, we learn that Abram was very rich with silver, cattle, and gold. His material wealth grew so large that he and his nephew Lot had to part ways because the land could not accommodate them both. Isaac, Job, Joseph, David are other examples of wealthy men who were loved and blessed by God, and I can't help believe they went to heaven. So it isn't that God doesn't want us to eat, drink, and be merry, enjoy what God has given us. But we know from the Gospels that Jesus spent his time eating and drinking with people enjoying life. But he was also clear about where his security lay. Sooner or later, we learn that no amount of wealth or property or dishes can secure our lives. No amount of wealth can protect us from a genetically inherited disease, from our husband dying of cancer. No amount of wealth can keep our relationships healthy or our families from falling apart. And in fact, wealth and property can easily drive a wedge between family members, as in the case of the brothers fighting over their inheritance at the beginning of the text. The most important message, then, is that no amount of wealth can secure our lives with God. In fact, Jesus repeatedly warns that wealth can get in the way of our relationship with God. He said, take care, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. The rich farmer is not foolish because he makes provisions for the future. He is foolish because he believes that his wealth can secure his future. He said, soul, you have ample goods laid out now. For many years you can eat, drink, and be merry. So, that tells me that I'm not going to hell in a handcart for buying a new refrigerator with ice in the door or getting another set of dishes. But another message is that you can't take it with you. And the Old Testament reading is from Ecclesiastes 1 through the 23rd verse in the 2nd chapter. This was a little long, but it's good. So this was the words of the teacher, the son of David, king of Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the teacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What do people gain from all of the toil under the sun? A generation goes, a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises, the sun goes down, and hurries to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north, and round the wind goes. On its circuits, the wind returns. All the streams run to the seas, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, they will continue to flow. All things are wearisome, more than one can express. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. So what has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has already been in the ages before us. The people of long ago are not remembered, nor will there be any remembrance of people yet to come by those who come after them. I, the teacher, when king over Israel and Jerusalem, applied my mind to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. And it is an unhappy business that God has given to human beings to be busy with. I saw all the deeds that are done under the sun, and see, all is vanity and chasing after wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who ever were in Jerusalem before me. And my mind has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my mind to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. And I perceived that this also is just chasing after wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation. And those who increase knowledge increase sorrow. And I said to myself, come now, I will make a test of pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But again, this was also vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my mind how to cheer my body with wine, my mind still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, until I might see what was good for mortals to do under heaven during the few days of their lives. I made great works. I built houses, and I planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks, and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves, and had slaves who were born in my house, and I also had great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had ever been before me in Jerusalem. And I also gathered for myself silver and gold, and the treasure of kings and of provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and delights of the flesh, and many concubines. And so I became great, and I surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. All my wisdom remained with me. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil. And this was my reward for all my toil. And then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had spent in doing it. And again, all was vanity and chasing after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly, for what can the one do who comes after the king? Anyway, it goes on, that what do mortals get from toil and strain, which they toil under the sun? For all their days are full of pain, and their work is a vexation, and even at night their minds do not rest. This is also vanity. So I guess David is telling us, use your time in abundance for good. A third lesson from this is being rich towards God. So what being rich towards God was, because Jesus said, use your time and your energies and your wealth to be rich towards God. And I have been pondering what that means, to be rich towards God. Paul tells us that those who are rich should not be conceited about their wealth, nor to trust in uncertain riches. In 1 Timothy, he said, rather, we are to be rich in good works, ready to give, willing to share. So God measures wealth by the quality of our lives and our generous disbursement of wealth to bless others. It comes down to the great commandment. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. So how I treat others is one of the ways I show God how much I love him, so that I can be rich towards God. So there was a story from Fair last week that has just resonated to me about being rich towards God. And it's about these three guys, they're FFA instructors, Jim, Sam, and Curtis. And Jim told me the story, and my heart has swelled with the goodness of this. They're not even churchgoers. They might consider themselves Christians. But we have a young man that was he's probably not young now, he was an FFA instructor in Eagle Point. And he and his wife, who also grew up in our program, Christopher Ruther, they moved back to Ohio, and he's getting his PhD. And while there, Krista has contracted cancer, and she is not doing well, and it's moved to her brain, and she's on a trach because she's got so much swelling from lymphoma that she can't really breathe. And he finally asked her, he said, what do you want? What do you want to do? She's probably dying. They have a 9th grader and a 6th grader. And she said, I want to go home to Oregon. All right. But they're college students. Even though he's getting his PhD, they don't have money. But they want to come home to where her family is and where Tim's family is. It's Tim Ray, Jerry Ray's son. So they said, okay, we'll figure out a way to do. And Tim's going, I got to find a house to live. I got to move my kids. I got to move all my possessions for us to get back to Oregon. And Jim said, we're going to come get you. So Jim and Sam and Curtis will all have families and young children and a very busy summer job. Said, all right, we're going to come get you. They said, you send your kids and your wife to Oregon, and we're going to be there. They left at 6 o'clock on Sunday morning. Jim said, we took a truck that I hadn't even made my first payment on, and took another person's big stock trailer, and they headed to Ohio. Never stopped, just to get gas and hit a restroom. Made it back there, and they made it to their place in Ohio, and Krista and the kids were already gone. And he said, we walked to the place, and I said, in 3 hours, we're going to be back on the road. We're going to load your house. And they had told him, you go get boxes from Lowe, everyone the same size, so that it's easier to pack. And in 3 hours, those 3 men loaded up an entire house, refrigerator, beds, all of their belongings, packed them in boxes, and turned it. And in 3 hours, we're on the road back to Oregon, and they were back by Thursday. It was 40 hours on the road. Cost them $2,000 to pay for gas and meals and whatnot when they were on the road. And so then Jim, when they were at the FFA Teachers Conference, kind of spread the word around, and they took up a collection. And they ended up with $3,000, and it paid for all of the moving expenses that Tim and Krista had. And I think, if that is not being rich towards God, those are examples that you say, wow, you gave your time, and they were prepared to give their money to move this man and his family in a very difficult time of their lives. And I think that's being rich towards God. And I look at myself and go, what have I done this week that nothing's going to trump that. But what have I done that would be rich towards God? And I think that's something that I've contemplated and said, okay, I've done some good things, but I need to make that an emphasis on my life. So here's what I gleaned from this. The things that I feel like my takeaways. I have to remember that things in and of themselves are not bad. Money can do a lot of wonderful things. It can provide for my family. It can be given to others in need, especially when we tithe in church on Sunday morning, or we give to like Redemption Ridge, the woman who came. Money can be used to create jobs for other people. It can promote the general welfare, and it gives us an opportunity to live a comfortable life. It just can't produce the kind of full and abundant life that each of us seeks and that Jesus promises. So it's not about the money. It's about our attitudes towards money and those around us. It's all about our priorities. It's about who really is God in our lives. It is about how we invest our lives and the gifts that God has given us. It's about how our lives are fundamentally aligned toward ourselves and our passing desires, or towards God and our neighbor. And there was a quote that I like by St. Augustine, who said that God gave us people to love and things to use. And sin, in short, is the confusion of these two things. Another one, I need to remember to give thanks unceasingly for the abundance in my life, and all that I do and all that I am to give glory to God, because our lives and our possessions are not our own. They are here because He blessed us with them, and we are merely stewards for them for the time that God has given us on this earth. There's also a message of hope in this. While I feel judgment, one of the writers said, you can look at it as a message that says, Jesus is telling you before it's too late to make changes in your life. He's telling us to do something about your situation and the gods in your life before you're like the rich fool whose life is being demanded of him that night. I need to remember that the real joy and happiness comes from my relationships with others and with God and being a good neighbor. The joy of a good conversation, the sense of purpose that comes from helping another, the warmth of a loving relationship, and the feeling of community from gathering with our friends and family. And the awareness again that we are blessed each and every day. And lastly, that my security isn't in my thrift savings plan. It is in God. And there isn't enough money in the whole wide world to guarantee that my kids will get a good education, or that I will be secure in retirement, or to guarantee that I won't be an elderly burden on my family. The key is to start out being secure in your sense of God's grace and in your trust in God's presence and power. And then, if you don't have money, you still have security. And if you do have money, it won't become your master. So after 3+ weeks of thinking about this parable, reading many commentaries on the subject, I come back to my dishes. It isn't that I'm a rich fool for having 8 sets of dishes. I'm grateful to God for His bounty, and I use them to serve others. I use them at the scholarship dessert to raise money for the high school scholarships. Kids use them for the 4-H foods contest, and I use them to celebrate with the people that I love. And in the end, it isn't about the dishes or the linens or my house. It's about the hold that these possessions have on me. And we need to look to God rather than money and